Hey, this is Keith Lowe of Brad, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Keith Lowe, bass player for Brad.
Yeah, promoting his new album EP, The Other Half of Silence.
First solo album out on Loosegroove Records.
Hey, let's get to that interview.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Keith, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Keith, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, Jeff, thank you. Thank you for asking me to be here. It's great.
So Jeff is a huge Brad fan.
Yeah.
And so a couple
nice.
weeks ago, he sent me a message and he informed me about your solo album that had been released. And Jeff says to me, he says, hey, do we have any slots that come open? Did anybody cancel? I said, well, I think we do. I think for this date, we have a slot open. He's like, you got to find his contact information. So I saw that you were with were interviewed with Mike Squires and Couch Riffs. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to contact Mike and see if we can get this going. So it's all about networking. Thank God for networking.
Yeah, amen.
So
career is based on it.
So let's get right into this. On January 20th, you released your new EP, The Other Half of Silence. Can you give our listeners an insight of the creation of this new solo venture?
Well, let's see. How in-depth do you want to get?
As in-depth as you want to get.
Okay. Let's see. So, born out of the pandemic, as a lot of things were. Let's see. So, I just found myself with, being a musician and no place to play.
Right.
Nobody to play for. So, I didn't know what to do. And then one day I had a dream about a melody in my head, and this is going way back to the beginning of the record. So I woke up, found out that the melody was La Vie en Rose, and gorgeous melody, and I thought, well, I don't have anything else to do. Maybe I'll learn that on the bass and, record myself playing that in the garden or something to do. So did that, and people liked it, and I thought, well, this could be something for me to do in the pandemic. So I just started picking songs, and each one got a little bit more involved. I started looping and, things like that. And I was having a really good time with it. And then some friends of mine started saying, hey, you need to make a record. And one of them was Regan Hagar, the drummer from Brad, because he's working at Loosegroove right now, Stone's label. So he was one that said make a record. And then there's Evan Schiller, who is a friend of mine in Seattle. And I knew him from way back in the 90s when he was a drummer in this group called Sad Happy, which was a really freaking cool, weird band in Seattle. That was just bass and drums.
Okay.
And then eventually, their motto was Waylon fucking bass and drums. And then they added my friend Skerrick on saxophone. So it was Waylon fucking bass and drums and sax. Yeah. Anyway, so Evan has his own studio and mixes a lot of records. And he's like, make a record here, buy this laptop and get this microphone and use this software. So I just started fucking around with this software and, the recording solo bass stuff. And it seemed like, yeah, this is something I could do. And then I remembered something that David Sylvain told me when I was touring with him, marvelous singer from the group Japan and Beautiful, Gorgeous Records after that. When we were hanging out, recording and touring, he's like, you should make a ambient album using just acoustic bass. And back then I thought, well, yeah, right, like that's going to be a thing. But it always kind of stuck in the back of my head. So when all this started kind of rolling along with all the input from friends and encouragement and stuff, I thought of that. It's like, hey, maybe now is that time. So, yeah, went to a cabin on the Oregon coast and holed up there for about 4 or 5 days with my gear and my cat and just started doing stuff.
So cool.
So that's kind of how that all came about.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, my favorite track on there is Whispers Behind the Wall. I think that one has a little bit of some vocals sounds behind it. Can you talk a little bit about that track?
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Well, I'm glad you like that one. I had some really beautiful circumstances lead up to some collaborations on this record. It's 95%, 92% acoustic bass.
Yeah.
And then Facebook can be a real drag, an awful place, but I was able to meet. It has some good things too, and one of those things is that I met Peter Chilvers, who is a collaborator with Brian Eno. He performs with him, and Peter also puts out his own records, which are gorgeous. I really love his playing. He's a beautiful keyboard player. And so, he commented on one of my bass videos on Facebook, during the pandemic, that he really liked it. And I thanked him and said, well, that's really great to hear. I'm a fan of your music. And to which he replied, well, I think I'm becoming a fan of your music. We should do something. Right?
Yeah.
So, when I was making my record down on the Oregon coast, he sent me something to play on, and I did. And I sent him one of my pieces. The first one I sent him was Light Reflecting Off the Water, the second to the last one.
Yeah.
And he added just this really beautiful subtleties to it and atmospheres, and it just elevated it so much. I thought, can I ask you to do another one? And he's just super generous and like, yeah, of course, I'll play on however many you want me to. We need to make music. So he added some really beautiful bits to that. piano shimmers, and then he added this choral piece. So we're talking about Whispers Behind the Wall now. I'm sorry. I'm taking your statement and running with it.
Yes.
I'll see you in about an hour, okay? So, yeah, he added this, this choir music that's from a record of this ancient piece. I should know the composer. This woman who was apparently known as a patron saint of music. And he put on little bits of the choir from this piece into Whispers Behind the Wall. And I just thought, oh my God, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And how did you think to put that in there? So, he's like, well, we could use this or not. And, if we use the actual recording, we'll have to get, we'll have to pay for rights to it and stuff like that. And I don't know if I should be admitting this, but then he also said, well, another thing we could do is just have someone get close to that, kind of improvise in that mode. And he got Cicely Eno, daughter of Roger Eno, to do the vocals on that one, and which was really fun. Roger is brother of Brian. And
yes.
Brian, and I love Roger's music. And when I was making my record, I thought, well, I should put somebody, I should do something that's not me, just because, I just thought it was something I should do. And I love Roger's music, and surprisingly, a lot of it really can translate well to bass. So I put on Evening Tango. Anyway, so it was a happy, that's a beautiful, beautiful piece. Mm-hmm. So it was really a nice, happy circumstance that his daughter, Cicely, did the vocals on that one.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. When it comes to the songwriting structure, were all of these songs written for this album in the now when you were putting this album together, or did you have any of this music written previous in the vault, or just kind of waiting for another time for it to be released, or was this all music that was written strictly for this album during the pandemic?
Pretty much that. And most of it recorded at that cabin. But when my friend Evan Schiller, kind of set me up with the laptop and recording gear and microphone, I thought, well, I have to practice using this software. So still in the pandemic, and it was building up towards the record. I just was trying to practice using the recording gear. Anyway, I'd go down to this river near my house, and I'd take 3-minute videos, and then I'd take them home. They'd be static videos of like water curling around a log in the river, stuff like that. And then I just practiced putting music to it. So there were 2 pieces I did, and it turned out they sounded good together, so I put them together, and that's the opening track, Sleep Shapes. Yeah. So that was 2 experiments I did, putting music to visuals. And when I was putting the album together, I thought, I need a little bit more material. Oh, how about these? And they go really great together. And I did add a little bit of cello on them later on, which is an instrument I picked up also during the pandemic.
Oh, cool.
Very good.
My son was playing cello, so I played it for him.
Nice. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful instrument.
When you're, I guess one of the questions I have is when you're writing like instrumental type music, how does it work for you? Do you come up with song titles and then try to structure music to meet that, or do you play the music, record it, and then kind of sit back and go, okay, what is this telling me, or what story is jumping out at me? Mm-hmm. How does it work for you?
Yeah, well, that's a nice question. Because there's the story behind it. Fancy that. So I when I got it all down, I started putting titles to it, and some were just like placeholders, for what where I drew the inspiration from, for a particular piece or something, and they were decent titles, but then another person who's really helped me on this project is the visual artist Russell Mills, who did the album cover. Oh, nice. And I met him when I was touring with David Sylvain, and Russell, really amazing visual artist, and he's done album covers for David and Harold Budd and Brian Eno, and most recently 9 Inch Nails. And when I met him, he also makes music in a really cool way. Since he has tons of really great musician friends, and his visual work is kind of collage, like, using different elements and putting them together to get a beautiful result. So he would ask his musician friends to send him sound samples, and then he would arrange them and make music out of them. And he puts out really cool, really interesting records under that. I think it's all under the moniker Undark. And so anyway, he asked me to contribute some sounds that eventually were used in an art installation he did. So, I donated some sounds, of course. I'm super happy to. And he always, ever since then, he's sent me handmade Christmas cards of
very nice,
of really beautiful work, And so when it came time for my album to find a cover, I thought, well, shoot, maybe he'll want to do something for me, kind of return a favor. And so I asked him, and he was really game. So he provided some images. Now, long story longer about the titles. He also was kind of advising me. I had some titles, and I wasn't proud of them or anything. And he just mentioned that this album really sounds great, and it needs, the titles need to be considered. So he sent me a list of. He kind of stockpiles names, for pieces of art and things like that. So he sent me a really long list of just names he's come up with. Whenever he found something that sounded interesting to him, he would write it down. And he gave me all those. And that's where I think I named every track after one of those. And I definitely named the album title after one of them. The other half of Silence. So, and the one Whispers Behind the Wall was definitely one that was already close to something I had named for it. I think I was going to call it In a Walled Garden. As a reference to one of my favorite stories of all time, The Secret Garden. Yeah. And I just thought, well, Whispers Behind the Wall, there's voices in there in that piece. And, it also harkens back to the story, where there's whispering going on in this walled garden. So anyway, That's where the titles came from.
Very cool.
And the artwork.
Oh, excellent. We're going to change gears on you here, and we're going to get to Jeff's favorite subject of the band, Brad.
Nice.
And Brad is releasing what I believe will be the band's final album. Is that correct? Is that what it's kind of feeling like here later on this year?
Well, yeah, I don't know. When we first started putting tunes together for this, we started working with some of Shawn's demos for this record and putting music to them. And, somebody was saying like, well, this is something we might be able to do into the future. So not necessarily the end, but who knows? Maybe that was just a thought at that moment. So, it could be the last Brad record for sure.
Well, as we speak about that, can you give us and our listeners an insight of what to expect from this new album?
Well, yeah, there's some tunes we all worked on together. And, Brad has been around for a long time, but it had a lot of periods of inactivity. But when we would get together, we really went for it. And as a result, we had stockpiled a bunch of tunes. And they were just kind of sitting there. And so, and we were getting ready to record another album, work on more material. When Shawn died, in fact, that's kind of how we found out he died. We booked studio time, and he didn't show up. And sadly, that wasn't unusual. Because, he liked to work on his own and go late into the night.
Sure.
He'd do stuff with us sometimes, but if he wasn't feeling it, he wouldn't show up, and then he'd do stuff later. So anyway, we had a couple of days booked, and he didn't show up for any of them. So, we were getting together to work on stuff for a new album. And then, of course, like the next day we learned he had passed. So we were working on some of the stuff, some of the tunes we had thought were really good. So those tunes are on there, some of them. And then we got some demos of Shawn's and put music to those. And, I think they came out really, really nice. And there's some really gorgeous moments on there. A lot of beautiful, vulnerable songs, and then some really great rock stuff.
Yeah.
So I really think it's a great record.
We're excited.
Yeah. Well, you kind of joined the Diamond Hand, which was, I guess a project of Shawn's back in 2008, or I think when it was released. I'm not sure when you joined, but you were on at least half of those tracks, I believe. That's where I first saw your name. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Shawn?
Well, yeah. How did that happen? I'd been kind of hanging around that scene, I guess, because I knew Stone for quite a while, and we had a little band together, called the Hank Choir, which was just a little ensemble that we had for Stone to practice singing, because he wanted to work on his singing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was kind of hanging around Stone for that. We got to know one another, and he asked me when Best Friends was going to come out, the Brad album. Yeah. He asked me to see about replacing bass on one of the tunes, which it was an awesome tune, and I was wondering, like, why do you want me to replace this? Because it already sounds really good. But, you know, I'm not going to say no. So I went in there and I did some stuff, and you know, as I thought, the original bass was fine, and, you know, Stone eventually came around to that. And so I wasn't on that record. But I learned that was part of the process. It's like, yeah, Stone, we do something, Stone wants to fix something, and then eventually he realizes, oh, yeah, the original went. That's one of the things that happens. So, you know, obviously a ton of his ideas are amazing. So it's not like that happened a lot. So I was kind of in the Brad orbit just because of that.
Nice.
And then, okay, wait. So, yeah, you were talking about Shawn.
That's all right. This is all great.
Yeah, well, Shawn's in Brad, so there it goes. Yeah, so I guess I'd been around, and he had heard me. You know, Shawn had heard me, and so he just asked me. You know, he asked a lot of people to sit in on recording sessions, and you know, and he also he was really open to ideas from them, and I think he really enjoyed putting different groups of people together to see what would happen. So, yeah, that was one that just came about by him saying, hey, come on out. I'm recording some music. Love to have you on it. So, I think for all the pieces I played on that record, Dave Cruzen was the drummer. And boy, was that fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had no idea who he was. And, you know, I didn't understand the background. Of him, you know, being the first drummer in Pearl Jam and all that.
Yeah.
I just knew, like, when we were done with the session, I was like, dude, we got to play together.
Nice.
Which is probably everybody's response.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so that's kind of how that happened. And, you know, I'm super happy with the results. And then maybe that's what kind of led to Brad, you know, both Stone working with me prior, and then Shawn, you know, liking my playing.
Very good. I wanted to switch gears again on you and talk a little bit about Fiona Apple. You were bandmates with Michael Lockwood, who's a Nothing Shocking podcast alum, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I listened.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Can you talk a little bit more about your time working alongside Fiona and Michael, and how did it work out for you? It was must have been such an exciting experience.
Yeah, boy, that was. Yeah. So obviously there's stories. That's why we're here. So a really fun thing, a really amazing thing happened. You know, right before before the Fiona experience, I had gotten an emergency call to play with G Love and Special Sauce on a tour. I don't know if you know them, but G Love had a funky little number that was pretty popular at the time. So I did a tour with him, and then I was going to record a record with him in Philadelphia. And then at the last second, that fell through, like maybe the day I was going to leave. And, you know, I was bummed, but then boom, like a day or two later, the Fiona call came in. And I wouldn't have been available to do it if I was in Philadelphia making that record. So just a little side story. Yeah, so got the call. My friend Matt Chamberlain was the drummer on that record, and he was rehearsing with the band to get it ready to do some showcase shows. And an old roommate of mine was the keyboard player on that, not on the record, but he was going to tour. And they had a bass player, and he wasn't working out, so her manager asked, like, who do we get? And my roommate, Dave Palmer, gave my name, and then Matt chimed in, and her manager loves Matt, kind of his secret weapon. So when Matt said, "Yeah, get Keith," it kind of sealed it, and went down there to audition, and they were getting ready to go to Europe and do some showcase shows. And, I went down for an audition, and I just thought, you know what, I'm going to pack for the tour just in case. Because it was going to be leaving like the next day or something crazy like that. Yeah. So, got the audition, and then, that was the beginning of a really nice period in my life, for sure.
So cool.
So, we had a great band. The guitar player in the beginning was John Bryan, who produced her record. He didn't produce that first one, but he and Matt were kind of all over those. And John Bryan played, bass and keyboards and vibraphone and guitar on the record. So he was in the band at that time, and he was the guitar player and the vibraphone player and the Chamberlain player. So, it was really awesome when he was in the band, and then, he was pretty busy starting a career of his own. So, we found Michael Lockwood, Lucky.
Yeah.
He was suggested. And, he was fantastic. Really, really sweet guy. Really a nice hang, and just really talented. So, it was really, really lovely to meet him.
Oh,
have him along.
What a great band, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, I guess the only other Brad question I have, just to go back to that for just a minute, was about touring. I only got a chance to see him once back, I think the Interiors album, but prior to you joining. But you came in with United We Stand, and I think I read it was like their first time going over to the UK. Did you guys have any, did you guys ever record any shows, or do you guys have any live material in the can that you could ever release?
Man, nice. That would have been great. Not that I know of. Not that I know of at all.
I know there's a few YouTube videos out there and stuff I've checked out over the years.
Yeah, that's really fun to see. Yeah, that was a fun time. It was Brad's first time over there, and a lot of folks were coming out, so that was really great. Yeah, we were playing really good then. It would have been great to have some of that recorded. And that was a humming little unit after playing together for so long.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about David Sylvain. Yeah. And after all these years of me mispronouncing him, after you corrected me, I'm a huge Japan fan, and I love Rain Tree Crow. And I didn't realize that you had worked with David Sylvain in his solo endeavors. I always found that David to be an eclectic genius. How did you get involved with working with David? Do you kind of have the same sentiments as you as a musician? Very eclectic in his approach to making music.
Yeah. He's amazing. He's a genius, and just a stunning songwriter and artist in general. So that came about by I worked with this guitar player, Bill Frisell, for a little while, jazz guitar player. And, I did a record with him, and I did some touring with him. And Bill had provided some pretty cool sounds for the Everything and Nothing. No, wait, not Everything and Nothing. Dead Bees on a Cake, that album of David's. And David was getting ready to tour, and he asked Bill, like, hey, who do you know that plays acoustic bass and electric bass? And, thankfully, Bill suggested me, and that was enough for David, which was amazing, just freaking flew me out there on his recommendation. So that's when I started. We were getting ready to do his retrospective tour, Everything and Nothing. And, so that's when I started working with him. Stayed out at his place in New Hampshire for at least a month rehearsing, getting this thrown together band into shape and sounding like a cohesive unit. And then touring, and after that, he wanted to put a band together. So, thankfully he picked me. And that's when we worked on the album Snowborn Sorrow.
Ah, gotcha.
And that was it. The recording session I was involved in was me and David's brother Steve Jensen, the drummer from Japan. It was just us three out at Dave's little studio in New Hampshire, this old carriage house that he had transformed into a studio. And man, it felt like I was out there for 2 months or something, which was awesome. It was just so nice waking up and slowly make your way to the studio and just start doing weird shit. And, watching how those two kind of finessed songs together was really amazing. And we made that record, and it turned out to be, he didn't want it to just be a David Sylvain solo record. So eventually he got together with this German performer, composer, Bernd Friedman, and they Bernd added a lot of stuff to it. And so it became those three as a band, and, I was a side guy in that, who was there at the beginning and, helping record all those tunes and shape some of them. But, we put that together, and then later we toured for that record, which was really fun.
So cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we are running out of our allotted time for the evening, but I got one last question to ask you, then we'll leave you alone. Deal?
Okay, great, yeah.
So I asked this question to all of our guests. The mystery of rock and roll, the dawning of the internet, social media, has taken the mystery away from rock and roll. As you, the artist and the fan, which do you prefer, this day of accessibility, or do you miss that mystery that rock and roll once had? Because let's face it, if we didn't have the internet, we couldn't do this with you right now. So where's your mind at in today's music and entertainment?
Well, I'm really nostalgic and sentimental as a person. So for me, I can't help but think back to how I learned about rock and roll. And that was through records and just playing along with records. And it seemed very mysterious. There there were no glimpses into the process of how songs came about, or even how musicians developed and, fell into their own styles, and, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So to me, the, music back then had a really deep mystery to it. And I love that, Mm-hmm. I can't help but, just have a strong sentimentality for that era. And, that sometimes when I would work on songs in my career, if they were like cover tunes, or just learning a piece just to get a certain style under my fingers, I was always a little disappointed at the end, like, oh, well, there goes the mystery of that one. So it's fun to see the inner workings, but I love the mystery.
Well said.
So,
yeah. Well said. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
Well, mostly it's the solo record and Brad. I guess there's a couple of records a few records I've played on recently that I wouldn't mind people knowing about. Mm-hmm. I mean, but, we don't have to spend time on those.
Keith, thank you so much. It was a true pleasure.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. It really means a lot. I really appreciate it.
It was fantastic.
Very, very nice.
Fantastic talk. And I'll be in touch with you in probably about 3 weeks with this edited episode. Sound good?
It sounds wonderful.
All right, man. Have a good night. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both